Hi, I'm Beau Carnes with freeCodeCamp.org. In this course, I'll be teaching you how to build a Hackintosh. A Hackintosh is a non-Mac computer built with PC parts that runs the macOS operating system. In this course, we'll be building a computer that runs macOS Big Sur. The main benefit of building a Hackintosh, instead of just buying a Mac, is that it is way cheaper. In this course, we'll be creating a computer that matches the Mac Pro specs, but for less than half the price. And you can get the price down even cheaper if you don't need the power of the Mac Pro. I've heard about people creating a Hackintosh for less than $100. It's not illegal to create a Hackintosh, but it does go against Apple's end-user license agreement. So don't think you can just take it to an Apple store for repair. Also, in some places it is illegal to sell a Hackintosh. This course has two parts. In the first part, I will show you step by step how to build the system that we're turning into a Hackintosh. In the second part, I'll show you how to install the macOS Big Sur operating system using OpenCore. If you already have a computer you want to use, you may be able to just skip to the second section to learn how to install macOS Big Sur. Many computer parts work for Hackintoshes, but not all of them. In the description, I have a link to a page that will show you which hardware works for Hackintoshes. If you want to be safe, you can just use the exact parts I used. And in the description, I have a link to all those parts. But feel free to mix and match. Just make sure to confirm that the parts you use are compatible with the Hackintosh. When I show you how to install macOS, you can follow along no matter what hardware you use. However, there are some parts where it does make a difference what hardware you have, but I'll point that out and show you how to figure out what to use for your specific configuration. Also, one thing to note is that to install macOS like I show in this course, you will have to have access to another computer with macOS. We'll be using macOS to create the macOS installer that we'll use to create the Hackintosh. But maybe you have a friend or a coworker that will allow you to borrow their Mac just for a little bit so you can create the installer. I'm going to personally use this Hackintosh that I create in this course to do a lot of video editing and graphics. So I just wanted to make sure it was powerful enough. And that's why I tried to make the specs line up with the low-end Mac Pro with a few upgrades. I also wanted to make sure that the computer looked pretty cool. Many years ago I used to build computers, and this is the first one I've built for a while. And it was just interesting seeing what things stayed the same and what things have changed since then. Okay, let's start by looking at the parts that I chose for the Hackintosh. Okay, I got this case because I like that it has this little window here. It's going to be cool to be able to see everything inside. I have some things that are going to create different lights and make it look cool inside. And I said one of my main things I'm thinking about is what it's going to look like. And it's going to fit everything I need. And then we got this motherboard here. It's going to have all the ports that I need. It has some good cooling. And I got this GPU cooler. And it does have some LEDs on here, so to make it look cool inside. And this should be more than enough to cool my GPU. And speaking of GPU, we got this 8-core GPU, and it's Intel. And for Hackintoshes, Intels are often more likely to work. You can always check the description where I have a link of the different parts that are going to work, but a lot of different parts will work with the Hackintosh. And then we have our GPU here. Now, the GPU I got because it was similar to what the Mac Pro had, and also because it was this specific GPU, this specific graphics card, was on a list of graphics cards that are supposed to work with Final Cut Pro. And I'm going to be commonly using this computer to edit videos on Final Cut Pro. So that's why I got this specific graphics card. And then we have our hard drive here, our 2 terabyte hard drive. Now this is a little upgraded compared to the default Mac Pro hard drive, but with doing a lot of video, I think I'm going to need a lot more space. And then we got our RAM here. I got 34 gigabytes of RAM, so this is going to be really good for video editing. We're going to need at least 34 gigabytes. 64 for my research. The next step up that sometimes people get is 64, but that's going to be a little overkill. We probably won't, for my purposes, I probably won't need that much RAM. And you may not even need 32 gigabytes. You may be able to get by with 16 gigabytes. I'm going to be plugging my computer directly into our network, into our internet. Instead of using Wi-Fi, I'm going to go right through a cable. And I did get the Magic Trackpad for two reasons. One, I love using the trackpad on my laptop, and I wanted to see how easy it is to get official Mac parts to connect to our Hackintosh. And then I got a power supply, so this should be more, 650 watts should be exactly what we need, or even more than what we need to run all these things. And then I did get a new monitor. So I got full HD, so it's going to be more similar to the resolution on my MacBook Pro. Okay, well, let's start by taking the motherboard out of the box. And this is a refurbished motherboard, but it should work just as well. Don't need any of these things. Oh, got some cool stickers here. So I'll just put all this extra stuff off to the side. And I got some cables. And what I'm going to do is actually, well, first I'm going to empty this box. Got a bunch of things. And then I'm going to just close the box. And I'm going to use the top of this box to do the build on. This will be like a little platform. And you do have to be careful with static electricity. So you want to touch something metal, like maybe the case. So I'm going to actually just touch the case to kind of get all the static electricity off, or maybe you have one of those little, there's these little things you can put around your wrist that will help with the static electricity. But I should be fine from just touching something metal or this case. It will get the static electricity off and won't destroy anything on any parts. So I'm going to just pull this out here. Okay, so that's pretty nice looking. We got a lot of different slots to put things in. So these are all the built-in stuff. See, we even have a USB Type-C. We have HDMI. Now, we're not even going to use this HDMI because we have the other graphics cards, but we'll be using a lot of this USB. We'll be using the Ethernet cable port, and then we have the audio built in here. So, and we won't be using this slot here, obviously, because we'll be using the USB. And so this is going to have everything we need here. Okay, now I'm going to grab the CPU. Got the CPU here. That's the first thing we're going to install into the motherboard. So I got some scissors, so I can just kind of open this here. And we'll take this out of the box. Okay, and the CPU is just this little thing in here, right here. I think it's focused. Yep. So this is the CPU we're about to install right in the motherboard. Okay, so we have to pop open this thing right here in the motherboard to install the CPU. So there's a little metal thing that can just move out like this. And so this pops open like this. And this is right where we put the CPU. So let me take this CPU out. I just have to make sure the CPU is facing the right direction. You see this arrow? That's going to go toward the outside. And there's these little slots on both sides of the CPU. You're going to make sure that those slots line up with the slots right in the motherboard. So let me place this right into the motherboard. And then we can just close this top thing right down like this. And this kind of pushes it in place. And the CPU is installed. Okay, now that I got the processor in, I'm just going to have to pop this off. Soon we're going to install our cooler that's going to connect right to the processor. But first, let's install our RAM. Okay, next up, the RAM. So, again, this is 32 gigabyte RAM, and we're going to install it in the motherboard. So let me get this opened. So there's 4 RAM slots, but we just have 2 sticks of RAM. So we're going to install it in the 2nd and 4th slot, which is B2 and A2. That's what they recommend when you don't have 4 sticks of RAM. So make sure that this is pushed out on where you're going to put in the RAM here. So I just push out all of them. And I'm going to put this one in here first. I'll do the A2. Now if you have 4 sticks of RAM, you just fill in every slot. So I'm going to push this in until I kind of hear it clicks, and then I can push in this side right here to make sure it's in. Now I'm going to do the next thing of RAM. Push that in. Okay. And that clicked. And the RAM is installed. Okay, now we're going to start getting the case ready. And then we're going to put the cooler on the processor, and part of the cooler gets attached to the case. So let me grab this. Now I have to get the parts of the case off so we can start putting things inside. So I'll just unscrew this here. Okay, now let's get the back of the case open. Put this off to the side. So one cool thing about this case is there's a lot of stuff for cable management. So we're going to have all the cables back here to kind of hide them out of the way. And we'll put that back of the case in front of it, so we'll kind of hide all the cables that are going everywhere. And there's little things to put the cables in, and we already have some cables kind of going right through here. So let's turn the case back around. Okay, we'll take this extra packaging out right here. And this is just an empty, well, I guess it's not empty. Let's see what's in it. And here just has some extra cables and some stuff that we'll be using later, and then a manual here. Now we're going to prepare a case to put things in. We could take these fans out temporarily while we put the motherboard in, but I'll leave them in for now and then see if we need to, just to see. We'll see if we can fit the motherboard in or not with those fans there. I'm going to take this part off here. This is where our cooler is going to go. There we go. Yeah, you're supposed to be able to use your hands to untighten these, but sometimes they're a little too tight and you have to use a screwdriver. This bag was in the box that I pulled out from behind the case, just in that slot. And I'm going to get some screws that I'm going to use to attach the motherboard to the case. So I think these ones are going to be the screws. I'm just going to confirm by putting them in before I put the motherboard up. And these are way too big. These are not the screws. Okay, let's try again. I think that these ones are the screws. They're a little smaller. Let's see if these fit in. These are the right size, so now I'm going to use these to install the motherboard. Got this motherboard that we're going to install. First, I'm just going to peel this off. And then we have to make sure it lines up, and we have all the ports on the side, and we have to make sure those ports line up correctly in the case so they go through the back of the case. It fit in without having to take the fans off. So we have to make sure this is lined up here. So you can see there's still a gap up top, so I'm going to have to adjust the motherboard so this part lines up with all these ports here. Okay, we just have to be very gentle, but I got the back is now popped out a little bit. So now I'll get a screw on the screwdriver and get one of these screwed in. Okay, I'm going to try something new. I'm going to actually try putting the case down. I think this is going to make it a little simpler to install. I probably should have thought of this to begin with. Okay, now I'm going to get in here and I'm going to try screwing this in again. I got the motherboard installed. And next up is this hard drive, this solid state drive. It's a PCIe M.2, and there's a lot of different types of hard drives that could work with this motherboard and case combo, but this the type we're going to be using. It's a 2 terabyte, so we just open this up. You can see it right in here. So let's see how to get this thing installed into this motherboard. For this type of hard drive, there's 2 places where it can be inserted into this motherboard. One's under this panel and one's under this panel. So we're going to take off this panel so we can insert the hard drive, or the solid state drive that is. So let me just unscrew this. So first we're going to insert this side into the slot on the motherboard. So let's put it over here. Okay, now to hold this in right here, we're going to have to put this plate on. and this plate's there's gonna be a screw that will go right in there and hold it on. The back of this actually has something that we can remove, and it's gonna help the solid state drive stick into place better. So let's do that. Now, okay, the solid state drive is secure. Now the exact order that I'm installing all these parts in is kind of up to the user. You don't have to install things in the exact order. We could have put the solid state drive in before we put the motherboard in. So it's okay if you do things a little out of order, but some things just make it easier. Like it's easier to put the motherboard in before you put the cooler on, because the cooler is going to attach to here and then it's going to attach to the processor. But right now we're going to install the power supply. So I'll get this opened up. Okay, we got the power supply. Let's get this put in the computer. So we got the case turned around and we're going to insert the power supply. The thing is, the fan should be pointing toward the bottom of the case, toward the floor. So I'm just going to slide this in right here. And then I'm just going to turn this a little bit so I can start screwing this in. The power supply actually came with a bag that has some zip ties and some screws, so this is what I'll be using to make sure the power supply is secure into the case. Whoops. Almost lost some there. So just got to get this screwed in. Okay, we're going to get some of these cables and we're going to snake them through so we can get them plugged into our motherboard. I'm pretty sure we're only going to need this cable. The power supply has a few different ones because it just depends on what motherboard you're going to use. So we're going to try to snake this through here. And we're eventually, while we're looking at it, there are some other cables here. These cables are for our case. So we can see our case has some ports at the top of the case, and some of these cables here are going to help us get those working. We have to get these plugged into our motherboard. So let's see if we can get these plugged into our motherboard and our power supply here. So it looks like some of these are connected to our fans, but right now I'm going to slide these through here. And some of these will wait till later to get installed. Okay, let's turn this around. Okay, let's get our power supply put in first. So here's the cable for our power supply. So let's see how this is going to go in. I'm going to have to kind of turn it a little bit. This is going to be a little tricky because it has like a tight curve here to get in. And we just need to get it to snap into place. Okay, our power supply is now going to our motherboard. Okay, I made a mistake before. This second cable coming from the power supply does actually go right into the motherboard. And it's been a little while since I put together a computer, so I forgot about some of these steps. But now I remember, we're going to put this right through here because it's going to be in the top corner of the motherboard. So I'm going to put that here, and I'm going to put this cable through the spot to hold it in place, and I'll use this little twisty tie here. And let's turn this around. Okay, in this top left corner, we can see where we're going to plug in the other cable. You can kind of see in that top left corner, there's a spot to plug that in. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, I'm going to grab the cable and twist this around. I just used two hands to plug in the cable, so we got it plugged in at the top corner of the motherboard there. All these cables that were connected to the other ports and stuff on the computer, we're going to have to get these installed too. These are, actually we can probably make them come up through here, because these are all going to connect at the bottom here. So I'm actually going to make these come up in a different spot. So first, let's get this out, and this is going to go right into here. Got it. And then here's another one. I think this is the audio. Got that put in. And next, basically I'm just looking at the connections on these cables and trying to figure out which parts of the motherboard that these fit in. So here's another one. This is actually supposed to go over here, but we're going to have to put in an adapter. So let me pop this out here, and then I'm going to put up the other area, so here. Now I'm going to get the adapter. So here's the adapter. It came with the motherboard, and so I'm going to put this into one end, and there's these different things here. Let me turn around this way. See, we have the HDD, LED, power, SW, PLED, and the manual for the motherboard shows where I'm supposed to put all that stuff in. So I'm going to plug the adapter on one end, and then I'm going to use this diagram to figure out where to plug in those other parts, those other cables, in this corner area right here. So let me do that now. Okay. Let's get the HDD one. Okay, this power one. And now I just got all of them plugged in there. Okay, so now I can just run this cable back out the back. There we go. Okay, one of these cables is going to fit right here. Let's see. There we go. Now, you can just kind of pull these through here so they kind of get out of the way a little more. Now I have to plug in the cables for these fans. These fans have cables that are going to come in around and plug in near those other cables. We have this cable, and then we have this other fan cable. And I'm going to try to get them both plugged in to the motherboard. Okay, I was looking in the manual for my motherboard, and I should have done this first. It's showing where all the fan cables should be plugged into for the power, and I had it wrong. So let me readjust some things here and put the fan cables where they're supposed to be. Okay, I got both the fan cables. In this cable, I'm actually going to run it right through the top here. So it's going to come around here, and I'm going to run it right through the top. And I'm just going to leave it like this because it takes up some of the slack here. And this cable I'll run kind of the way I was originally thinking, right through here. So we have the two fan cables. Let me turn this around. So if we look at the manual here, we have chaff fan 1 and chaff fan 2. That's the chassis or the case. So we see the first one's going to be right over here, and then the second one is going to be right here. So let's do the first one right here. It's going to be right below the processor, and it's going to be right there. So let's so that's the one that the cable that I ran through the top. We're going to plug in right there. So you can see it says CHA1 right there, and that's where I'm going to plug in the cable. And I am going to need some more slack, so I just let out the slack from the back. And I'm going to take this cable and just plug it in right where it says CHA1. So here's a good close-up of that cable plugged in right there. Now let's get the other cable plugged in. Now here's the other fan cable. According to the manual, we're going to plug it in on this top one here. So you can see it from this other angle. There's an extra pin sticking out because the spot on the motherboard has 4 pins, but there's only 3 sections on the cable. And that's normal. So that's what it should look like. Okay, so we got both fans plugged in. Both of the case fans. Okay, I have 2 more major things I need to get installed. One, the graphics card, and then the cooler. So I'm going to install this first. Let's get this open. This is going to be one of the most complicated things. that's going to be in our computer, and you may not even need a cooler like this. This is really if you're going to be doing things that take a lot of power, and if you want to try to overclock your machine and you just need to make things a lot cooler. You may be able to get by with something a lot simpler. But this is what we're going to be installing in this machine, and I'll show you how I do that. So this comes with quite a few things. We have this grill that's going to go up front. And then this is the part that's going to, whoops, this is the part that's going to attach to the processor. We have 2 fans, and then we have just a bunch of miscellaneous items that we're going to use during the installation. So I'll get rid of this box. So just as a little behind the scenes, here's my box graveyard right here. I have a bunch of boxes and just other things that I keep discarding as I'm building this computer. We're going to start by getting the fans installed onto this grill. Depending on where you're going to mount this is which direction the fan's going to go. But since I'm mounting on the front of the machine, I will face it like this. And then we have our second fan. Okay, we're going to find these screws that we're going to use to mount these fans. And they just hand tighten. So let's put this right in here. Now I'm going to grab this piece that I took off of the case, and we're going to mount this to this piece right here. Got these screws. We're going to put that right into the case here. We got the grill installed. Now we just have to connect the end to the processor. Now this part we could have done earlier. It may have been easier. But there's these 2 pieces like this that we're going to put on both sides. Okay, if you look at this, see there's a slot at the top of this. And this has to go right into the slot. There's going to be a slot right here. I'm going to put it and make it line up with the slot. I'm going to get a screw. And I should have already had the screw ready. I'm going to have to put this down for a second. So I'm going to open this little bag of screws. And I'm going to put this on here. And the screws actually have to go in from the bottom. There we go. I got the first screw in. Now let's get this one in. Tighten that up. Okay, now let's do the other side. Now, this is going to line up right here, but we're going to have to do some things before we put it on there. See, we have this piece, and this piece is going to go on the back of the case. So let me put this stuff in here for now. I'm going to turn the case around. And this piece is going to go in like this. These are optional. You can pull these off if you want. I'll pull that off so it sticks better. And we're going to line it right up. Kind of push. That stickiness is going to hold it on. And then we're going to turn around and put in some little screw things. Okay, now we have to install these things. Open this up. And we just screw them in. And they're going to go right into the back that we just put on. And I'm holding the back with my other hand. They screw into it. Got one. Okay, now we're going to add some of this thermal compound right to the processor. And then we're going to put this onto it after removing this little plastic wrap. We're going to put this onto it. And then there's going to be 4 of these little things Let's get it focused. We'll put 4 of these little things, one in each corner. For the thermal compound, they recommend just putting a little pea-sized little dollop on it. So let's do that. And now it's very important to remove this label here, or it's not going to work well. Okay. Now this is the moment of truth. I have to push it onto the thermal compound and basically press it in. Now let me hold it with one hand, and I'm going to start putting these tops on. Okay, got those corners in. Okay, we have 2 cables coming out of this pump right here that we just put on top of the processor. One cable is going to be to run the lights. There's going to be lights that light up right on here, and the other cable is a power cable. So the cable for the lights that has the bigger end, I'm just going to run this through the top because we're going to bring it down somewhere else later. Let me just get it through there. The other cable is going to be for power. So you're going to look for something on the motherboard that says pump. And if you look right here, I'm just about to get a close-up, but it's going to be right here. Let me show you. So you can see right in there it says pump. So that's where we're going to plug in the power cord for the pump. So let's do that right now. So we still have to adjust this cable so it's out of the way. That goes to the fan right here. But we're going to put the pump power cable right above that other cable. So okay, now we're going to use this fan splitter cable that came with the cooler. So we're going to plug this right into the motherboard where the fan power supply is. So there's our water pump on the processor. If we look right here, it says, you can see where it says CPU fan. So that's the slot where we're going to plug in that cable. Okay, I'll just plug in just like this. And then the other parts of the cable, I'm just going to run behind the motherboard. These front fans that we installed from our cooler, we have all these cables coming off of it. So now we have everything ready that we can get the power to these cables plugged in. So first of all, let's get these cables. I'm going to run these cables behind this red thing so we can put them out the back of our case. Okay, now I got the cables run through coming out the back of the case. We can turn the case around. And we have all our cables coming out the back now. Coming out the top, we have our cable splitter. And then we also have the cables from our fans, the power cables. So we're going to take the power cables from our 2 fans and just plug them into these 2 ends of the cable splitter. Okay, so now we have our fans powered. So we have 3 more cables that aren't plugged into anything, and these are the RGB cables. And in the box, we have this 3-way RGB splitter. So we are just going to plug each of the RGB cables into each of the ends of this 3-way splitter. Okay, one to here, and there are 2 little arrows. I don't know if you can see this, but the arrows should line up. The arrows should line up. That's how you know you have it plugged in right. So we have this one. And then the third one. Now the case came with these little plastic things. That's to help pull these cables together. So we can put this right over the top here. And that holds these together. I'll put one right here. Here's the third one, so I can hold all of these 3 connections together. Now, I'm just going to run, this end, we're going to plug into our motherboard. I'm actually going to put it over here because that's going to be closer to where I'm going to plug it in on the motherboard. So let's turn the case around. On the bottom here, you can see it says, that white connector says RGB on it. So that's where we're going to plug in the cable that we just brought through. You want to make sure the arrow on there's an arrow right here, that's going to be on the left side. that's going to be where the power is, and then the other things are for the different colors. Okay, we have one more thing to install, and that is the graphics card. So, let's see how to do that. So let's get this out of its package here. So that looks pretty nice. It has these connections on the end here. And so we're going to have to get this into our motherboard, and then we're going to have to power it. If you can see this, there's a place to plug a power cable in right here. So if you see on this side, you can see that there's 2 tabs here. That means it's going to take 2 slots from our case. So let's look at that. So you can see these things here. Each of these can be taken out depending on what you need to put into there, whatever card you have. And we're going to need to take out 2. To figure out what 2 to take out, let me kind of place this card in here. We're going to put into this slot here. And it looks like we're going to take out the 2nd and 3rd slots. The top covering will just stay where it's at. So I'm going to take off this one, and then we're going to put in the card into this slot here. So I have to take out this one and this one. So I'll start with this one. And then before I put the card in, I'm going to have to take out this panel right here. So I'll take out these screws. Let me get a screwdriver to help. And I'll slide this. Well, I don't even have to take it completely off. I can just slide it over. So we're going to put the card into this slot right here. We have to make sure that this is popped out. So it's kind of goes in and out. So it's going to start out, and when we put the card in, it will go in, and it will snap in. Now I got the card, and I'm going to have to push it into the slot, so this whole thing pops in, and then these metal tabs go into the side of the case. So that's what I'm going to do right now, to make sure it lines up with the slot. And then I have to make sure the metal tabs, or the metal part, is all on the side. And then just do it very gently and just push down and wiggle, and it goes right in. And you can see this tab right here pop down when I push the card in. Okay, now I will turn the case a little bit. And I'm going to have to make sure the card is screwed in. So I'll put some screws right here. So these are the screws that just held on those little black panels. But now I'm using the same screw to screw in the card. And it looks like there's some damage on this metal thing. This is a refurbished card. There's currently a shortage of graphics cards. So it's hard to get good deals on new ones. And now I can put this panel back and then twist this, and then there's one on bottom. I don't know if you can see it. Okay, now we have to plug in the power cable right here. Okay, we're back at the back of the case. And to get the power to the graphics card, we're going to take this cable that came with the power supply, and then back here, in here, there's a place on the power supply to plug in this end. So we're going to plug in this into the power supply, and then we're going to run it through, and then we're going to plug this in to the graphics card. So I'm just going to reach in here and plug it in. I'm not going to be able to show you because it's just too shadowy in there, and it's hard to even get my fingers and the camera in there at once. But if you're doing this yourself, you'll be able to easily see where that plugs in. Okay, I got it plugged into the power supply, and then I'll just run this right through here. Okay, got the cable coming through here. And this has a thing where it's kind of separated, so you are going to have to kind of put them together to plug it in. And it snaps right in there. And one more thing I didn't put in the spread earlier, this is a Wi-Fi and Bluetooth card that specifically works with macOS. So we're going to need to use this. Most motherboards that have built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, it won't work with macOS. So we need a card that's specifically going to work with macOS. Now at first I was thinking maybe I don't have to have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth because I'm going to have my internet connected through a cable. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, yes, I want to have Bluetooth. It also helps make other features on macOS work, like AirDrop, and I think even iMessages. This card is going to go into this short slot right here. So I just have to pull out the appropriate cover here. This cable that came with the card is what connects the Bluetooth to the motherboard. So we have to plug one part into the card and one part into the USB port on the motherboard. The cable is going to plug into the corner of the card right here. We're going to plug the other side right into that port that says USB at the bottom of it. So the Bluetooth cable is installed. I'll just do a little bit of cable management here. Now at the back of the case, I just have to screw on these antennas. This should be all set up. And the computer is pretty much done, I think. I'm going to need to test it now. Now, I already said I haven't really created my own computer for quite a while. And if I made any mistakes, you already know, because I would have put something on the screen or somehow indicated that I made a mistake and I had to redo something. But I don't know yet. So I'm going to test it. This is the moment of truth. I'm going to plug everything in and see if it works. Okay, I got my full HD monitor hooked up to the computer. I got my USB keyboard hooked up to the computer. And now I'm just about to hook up the power cable. And then I'm going to turn it on. Turn on the power supply. Now I'm going to press the power button. Whoa. Everything's lighting up. I think everything is working. That means I can finish the cable management and get the case put back together. And then eventually we'll have to do the setup. You can see on the monitor, I don't know if you can see with this glare, but it's saying that new CPU installed, please enter setup to configure your system. Now that I know the computer works, time to clean up these cables. Okay, now that the computer's built, we're going to learn how to install the macOS Big Sur software. This is the part where you're going to need a computer with macOS already on it. And we're going to start with downloading some of the software we'll need onto that computer. There are links in the description to all the software I'm using. We'll get OpenCore and ProperTree. We'll also need Mount EFI and OC jinx. And you'll soon see what it all does. Now I'll download the Big Sur operating system right from the App Store. If you're not familiar with macOS, you can get to the App Store by clicking the magnifying glass in the top right corner and typing App Store. Once you get into the App Store, search for Big Sur. Click Get, and then Download. Now you will need a USB drive. It's best if it's at least 16 gigabytes. I'm going to format the drive now using Disk Utility. To get into the Disk Utility, just click the magnifying glass and type Disk Utility. Make sure that the view is set to Show All Devices. Click the USB drive, then click Erase in the top menu. You can call the volume anything you like, but I recommend MyVolume if you want to use the exact command I use later in the video. Make sure the format is MacOS Extended Journaled and that the scheme is GUID partition map. Then click the Erase button. After the USB drive is prepared, open the terminal in macOS. You will need to use a command in the terminal to make the USB drive into a bootable installer for macOS. There's a specific command I have to use here. Check the description for the exact text of the command. Also, this command is specific to Big Sur. If you're installing a different version of macOS, I'm going to leave a link in the description for the commands for the different versions if you're installing a different version. You'll have to wait a bit for this to install. After this is done, open the OC jinx program you downloaded earlier. To open the program, you will have to right-click the icon. Select Open, then select Open again. This program is optional to use. The software helps us prepare what we need to install macOS on our particular hardware setup. It will go out and get everything we need except the SSDTs and put them in a folder for you. You can also do this in a more manual method by following the OpenCore install guide, which I've linked down in the description. But this program simplifies things for us. On this first screen, under System Type, choose Coffee Lake. This is a reference to the specific type of processor I got for this build. If you are using a different processor, you may have to select something different here. Look in your processor's documentation to determine the name of the microarchitecture it uses. Getting this right is very important. A lot of these tabs we can keep at the default settings. Under Graphics, select whatever green, and under Audio, select Apple ALC. Under Ethernet, select Intel Mousy. You can keep firmware drivers at the default setting. The SM BIOS is important, and you will have to specify the correct system model. For this hardware setup, we'll select iMac 19,1. If you are using a different processor or a different operating system, this could be different. To figure out what to use here, if you have a different setup, go to the OpenCore install guide. Select the section on the left side for your processor type or chipset. In my case, it is Coffee Lake. Then find the heading Platform Info. Scroll down a bit and you will see a table with the SM BIOS to use. So for this build with the Big Sur operating system, we're going to select iMac 19,1 under System Model in the OC jinx program. Finally, we'll click the Generate EFI button at the bottom. Now you can open up the EFI folder that was just created and see exactly what's in it. Inside there are many files and folders, including an ACPI folder that is empty. This folder will be filled with SSDTs. But we now have all the other files we need, including drivers, texts, and a config.plist file, which we will be updating in a little bit. Now we'll get the SSDT files. This is different depending on your processor or chipset. You can find the exact ones you need in the OpenCore install guide under the ACPI heading. Make sure you're in the section for your processor type. There are 4 needed for the Coffee Lake system. Click on the first one, SSDT plug. Then we'll go to Pre-built SSDTs on the side and click Coffee Lake. And then I'll download all 4 of these. I have a link in the description to the page with these SSDTs. Once they are all downloaded, move them into the EFI folder, specifically into the ACPI subfolder in the OC subfolder. Now we'll use the mount EFI program that we downloaded earlier. We'll use it to mount the hidden EFI partition on the USB drive. We'll right-click on mount EFI.command and click Open, then Open again. If you get an error like I did, you can open the folder in Terminal and then run the program with Python 3 using the command python3 space mountefi.command. Once the program is running, select your USB drive. It should have a name like Install macOS Big Sur, since we made it into a bootable installer for macOS. In my case, it's option 2. I'll put in the password for the computer, and now the EFI partition has been mounted. You now have a mounted EFI partition and an EFI folder from OC jinx. Drag the EFI folder into the EFI partition. Now we'll open ProperTree, which we downloaded earlier. Like before, you can open it by right-clicking and selecting Open. Or you may have to run it from the terminal with the command python3 propertree.command. Go to File, Open. Select the EFI partition, then the OC folder. Then open the config.plist file. The first thing we need to do is to inject all of the files in the EFI folder into the config.plist file. So we have to go to File, then select OC Snapshot. Make sure you're on the EFI partition. Go to the EFI folder and then the OC folder, and click the Choose button. A dialog box could pop up here about what version to use. If this happens, click Yes. Now go back to File, then select OC Clean Snapshot, and select Choose. I mentioned that instead of using the OC jinx program, you can manually do everything by following the OpenCore install guide. At this point, we'll verify that everything got set up correctly according to the official install guide. So, on the guide for Coffee Lake, we'll verify these quirks are set correctly in the config.plist file. Let's see, devirtualize MMIO, set to true. Enable write unprotector, set to false. Protect UEFI services, we do need this in our system, that's set to true. Rebuild app memory map, set to true. Sync runtime permissions, set to true. And now we do need to set up our device properties so that our onboard graphics work. We just need to add this row of characters. I also have the characters in the description, so just copy it and put it into the config.plist under device properties. Click on Add, then right-click and choose New Child under Add. Double-click where it says New String and just paste the text into the field and hit Enter. Then select in the next column where it says String and make sure that it is set to Dictionary. Next, we need to make another child under it, as you can see in the picture in the documentation. Right-click on the text you just added and select New Child, and then replace New String with this text here from the documentation. Just copy the characters, also in the description, double-click and paste. Then change String in the next column to Data, and then add this set of characters right here in the third column. Again, if you have a different processor type, you're going to want to read this section in the documentation to make sure you are using the correct values. Now we'll add another new child. Make sure the child is under the line that starts with PCI and not the one that starts with AAPL. Replace new string with framebuffer-patch-enable. create another new child under the line that starts with PCI and replace new string with framebuffer-stolenmem. Now these should both be set to data, not string. And we need to add these numbers from the documentation in the third column. Now we'll scroll down to the next quirk section. And here they are in the config.plist file. And we'll just verify that everything here is set up properly. It looks like these are all correct because of the OC jinx program. Except one more quick thing, this disable RTC checksum should be set to true. This is a quirk with a specific motherboard I used, and I forgot to record myself setting it to true, and I'm recording this dialog later, so just know that this one should be set to true. Now we have to make an update to the NVRAM section. So what do we need? You can see that many of these boot-args are already here, but we still need to add a few. So debug equals 0x100. We'll just click into it here, make sure there's one space at the end, then copy this over. And then the final thing is to add this alcid equals 1. Now we'll change the language to English. So next to where it says prev-lang kbd, change data to string, and set the value to en-us:1 or 0, and hit enter. If you need a different language, just go to this link and you can find out what you should put in instead. The config.plist file is now done, so we'll go to File, then Save. We're now completely done setting up our bootable drive. So just eject the drive, and then you can plug it into your new Hackintosh computer that you just built. Now that we're on the Hackintosh, I'm not using screen capture anymore. I'm just recording the monitor of the Hackintosh using a video camera. So the quality won't quite be there until we get this installed, and then we'll go back to screen recording. So the USB stick is installed into the computer, and then I'll start up the computer, and then I'll need to get into the BIOS. So to do that, just hit the delete key, and then we'll get onto the BIOS. And here we are. Okay, so if you get into the BIOS and you see it like this, it's called easy mode. We want to go to advanced mode, which is right here. You can hit F7 or just use your mouse. Okay, so we go over here and set everything up as default. Load optimized defaults. Okay, I'm going to load them up and hitting enter. Now let's go over to advanced. This is where we need to get started. So platform miscellaneous configuration. Everything here is fine by default. CPU configuration. All of this is good. Okay, system. Our VT-D is disabled. That's what we want. But we want above 4G decoding enabled. Alright, memory configuration. Everything's fine. Graphics configuration. This is if you were going to use your onboard graphics. You would change this to CPU graphics. But we're not using the onboard graphics. Alright, we'll go out of here. Okay, a lot of these other ones are fine by default. Okay, down here where it says serial port configuration, we're actually going to turn it from on to off. We want the serial port to be off. Okay, the next thing we need to update in USB configuration, make sure XHCI handoff is enabled. Okay, now let's go over to boot configuration. We want to turn fast boot off, so we'll disable that, and everything else here is fine. Secure boot, we're going to have to change something. We're going to change the OS type to Windows UEFI mode. Now we're ready to save changes and reset. Make sure you have the USB drive in the computer still, because we're going to boot right back into the USB drive. Okay, when it boots, we'll press the F12 key because we want to choose the memory stick to boot into. Now if you get this error message, we'll need to go back to the BIOS. So let's go back into the BIOS, and we'll go over here to Secure Boot, which is under Boot. And we want to go down here to Key Management. Hit that, and then click on Clear Secure Boot Keys. Say yes. Now we won't get that message, so save changes and reset, and then I'll press the F12 key again. Okay, we come up to our bootloader, and we want to choose Install MacOS. That's the external USB drive stick. So hit enter, and now we're going to load the OS. Okay, this is what we like to see. Once we get to this part, it's going to be pretty simple the rest of the time. So we'll click on Disk Utility and click Continue. And then we'll click this drop-down arrow on View and Show All Devices. There are my hard drives. If you don't show all devices, you don't see your hard drive names. So you want to see the root of your hard drive. I'm going to erase this one. And I just click on Erase, and then you can call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it Hackintosh. And then you want to choose APFS for your format. And for the scheme, it should be GUID partition map. And then click Erase. All right, we're done. So we'll click out of here, and we'll click Install MacOS. Continue. Agree? And agree. And this is the hard drive I just formatted, so I'm going to choose it and click Install. This will take a few minutes here. It goes pretty quick. After the installation finishes, the computer will reboot and will come right back up to the boot menu. And then we'll click macOS Installer. It's going to take a little time, but now it's like turning on a brand new Mac computer. So you can just go through the installer like you're setting up a new computer, choosing the location, choosing any settings that you want, choosing any accessibility, choosing how you want to connect to the internet. I'm just going to kind of go through this part pretty quickly because what you want to choose may be specific to you. It's up to you if you want to sign in with your Apple ID. But at this point, basically you have a Mac computer. But once it finishes, you'll be into your brand new Hackintosh computer running the Big Sur operating system. And now we can finally switch back to screen recording instead of videotaping a monitor. Ah, that's a lot nicer. Now we're on the screen recording. Everything's nice and crisp. There is one more thing we have to do, but first, let's just bring up the About the Mac. And you can see we have the 3.6 gigahertz 8-core Intel Core processor. We have the 32 gigabytes of RAM. We have the Radeon RX 580 8 gigabyte graphics card. Everything looks great. Now we have to copy the EFI folder from the hidden EFI partition on our USB stick. We're going to need the Mount EFI program to access that partition. So I'll just open up Safari, search for Mount EFI, go to this link here, and then download the zip. Now I'll open up the folder in my downloads. Right-click on mountefi.command and go to Open, and then go to Open. Just hit OK. We're going to have to mount two EFI partitions. we're going to have to mount the EFI partition from our Hackintosh drive. That's the name of the drive on our Hackintosh. We're also going to have to mount the EFI partition from our USB disk. Our USB drive is called the Install MacOS Big Sur. So first, I'll select option 2 to mount the EFI partition from our Hackintosh. Now I'll choose the new option 2 for our USB drive, the Install macOS Big Sur drive. Okay, both EFI partitions are mounted, so we can close this. Okay, I'll open up the EFI partition that's on the desktop here. And to find the other EFI partition, when I have the Finder selected, I'll go to the Go menu at top, and then select Computer. And you can see now we can see both EFI partitions, not just the one showing up on the desktop. So I will click the other EFI partition that's been mounted. Okay, so I have a folder for each EFI partition that's mounted. One EFI partition has some folders in it, and the other EFI partition is empty. So let me back up a bit, and now I'll drag the EFI folder from one partition to the other partition. So now both EFI partitions have the EFI folder in it. Okay, now I can just restart the computer. And right after the computer turns off, but before it reboots right back up, I need to remove the USB drive. And if I take the USB drive out, then the computer should boot right back up into macOS. And there you have it. The Hackintosh is complete. I had no trouble setting up the Bluetooth or the Wi-Fi. They just worked. And I had no problem connecting the Apple trackpad. I've been using this Hackintosh for a few weeks now, and I even used it to edit this video, this very video that you're watching. So far I haven't had any issues, and it's running great. So good luck creating your own Hackintosh.